Thank you, everybody. Thank you all for being here. And thank you, everyone, for being online. It's great to see everyone, and I'm really excited about tonight's session. So here's what we're going to do. I'll do a prayer of gratitude to open up the healing session, and then we'll do a little quick review for the new people of what is energy healing, and then we will dive into tonight's session. Thank you to being for everything, for being this live webinar and all the healings therein. Thank you for being all the expressions of consciousness, those which heal, those which perpetuate the flow of knowledge, the forms of our ancestors, expressed as the physiology. Thank you for each one of us for blessing our session tonight with efficiency and effectiveness, with the ability to unfold the deepest and most useful understandings which support everyone's ability to become self-sufficient and self-sustaining through energy healing. Thank you to the eternal tradition of wisdom. All right. So thanks for being with me, everybody. All right. So what is energy healing? Energy healing is something that everybody can do because it utilizes a skill set that everyone has, which is the ability to focus attention. Everybody can do that. And in energy healing, what we do is we focus attention in specific ways and specific points within the field of attention, within the field of consciousness, in order to restructure the foundation that's behind disease in order to promote wellness. So in other words, behind all disease and discomfort and suffering, there are forms, subtle forms in the field of consciousness that are responsible for that suffering. And awareness or consciousness can fold in on its own nature to transform itself. So whatever those forms are that are responsible for the suffering in the first place, these can be modified or transformed through the process of folding consciousness in on its own nature in order to promote a better form or a more stable form or a form which promotes the evolutionary process. Ultimately, we want a form that's bigger than the form of suffering, ultimately. So that's basically what energy healing is. The art of it is navigating that field of consciousness because we have to know where to focus. Attention focuses easily. All you have to do is like, think of a flower and boom, the awareness is on the flower. But when we're looking in energy healing, we're looking to the seed or the source of the suffering. We want to get down and see where does it begin? Where's the origin of it? And then from the origin, the move is very small move. If we go at the problem from the surface, like maybe this leaf isn't doing well, and so we think, well, we want that leaf to do better, so let's paint it green, then that isn't the best way to get the leaf well again. The best way is to attend to the root, right? Okay. So navigating the field of consciousness is part of the skill set required to effectively eliminate suffering and illness. So we have 4 different perspectives for navigating the field of consciousness. We can look at consciousness from dense to subtle. In other words, physical, material, solid, down to more delicate, more abstract, down to the source of creation, which is completely unmanifest. That's one way of navigating the field of consciousness. We can navigate the field of consciousness, as does modern science, from very, very vast and large to very, very small, right? From the telescopes to the microscopes. We can look at the body. Sometimes the seed of illness, even if the overall effect on the surface is, oh, I feel yucky, could be that it's at a microbial level, could be a virus, which is at a fine level of the physiology. Or it could be some kind of collective karma. Could be something the ancestors have carried for many generations, which is kind of going out and looking at the bigger picture. So that's another axis. Another axis is the axis that runs between complementary pairs of opposites. And within the context of that axis, balance is the key. When we stabilize awareness at the point of balance between the complementary pairs of opposites, then they move together to form a wholeness. And that wholeness supports evolution and brings about a larger picture. It brings about functioning for the physiology and for the whole inner landscape of the individual at a larger level. The fourth axis is the axis from less awareness to more awareness. There's an axis there. And that's the axis. That's a really interesting axis, because that's the one that we as humans are basically traversing as we are going through our life process. Part of the value of being human is that we represent the expansion of awareness, the expansion of knowledge, the expansion of understanding, the expansion of consciousness. So in a sense, you could say the location on that axis of from like less awareness to more awareness is one of the sort of points of measurement of the ability to work the other axes. It's making me think that that's probably a really good place to do some energy healing to support everybody's ability to be more effective and more profound, more capable of doing energy healing ourselves. So, with our circle of everybody here, I'm just looking into the field. And what I'm seeing is what's lighting up for this awareness. And what I do is I love to give you guys the inner mechanics of what I'm experiencing while I'm doing this, because that lights up the means by which the energy healing works, right? So what I'm doing is I'm extending my awareness into the collective of our group. And with gratitude, thank you everyone for being with me. And I'm using my own physiology like a sort of mirror. I'm allowing the perception to come in sort of innocently and then reflect off of this being. And then what I do is I read my own physiology to see what's happening, because the physiology is a very brilliant and intelligent thing. It's made of cosmic material, and its job is to filter all the billions of bits of information that are coming in. So the physiology gets all the bits. It knows what's happening at the furthest reaches of the universe, and it knows where all the planets are right now, and it knows what's going on in the back closets of my refrigerator and everything. Everything. It knows everything. It knows about the cookies that are sitting out on the counter in the kitchen. So so whether all that information is at the level of conscious awareness or not, the body knows it. And then the body's job, there are all kinds of systems and functions in the body, right, that are involved in filtering out and just bringing those specific pieces of information that we need right now at this moment that are relevant to this moment. So with the intention to promote a healing for our ability to gain autonomy, greater autonomy over the landscape of the range from less awareness to more awareness. We want to gain autonomy because sometimes, like if I go to the state fair, there are like tens of thousands of people at the state fair. And at that time, I don't want to be taking a really, really in-depth detail read on everybody's physiology, right? So at that time, the idea is less awareness. But then there are other times, like, right? Like now, when it's good to have more. Okay, so just saying. So we want autonomy over that. You want autonomy over that. Okay. So I'm looking into the field of our collective, and I'm allowing the collective effect of everyone's consciousness to sort of reflect off of this physiology. And what I find is the first thing that lights up. And so what I do is then I innocently say, well, where does my awareness naturally go first? Like what is my body telling me is the most important thing to look at? And what my body's telling me is there's a connection between the heart level of the physiology, this whole heart, Mahamarma, auric field area, and the senses of perception. And it's interesting because also it includes senses of perception are associated with the mental level of the physiology, and the mental level lies along that axis that goes from physical material down to unmanifest. And so mental level is like about here. It's that area of the physiology, you process thought, ideas, beliefs, impressions, sensations, perception, avenue of awareness, and heart. So what I'm seeing is a very, very delicate, very fine connection being made between the wisdom of the heart and the way in which the heart understands reality. Because every part of our being understands reality. When I go to the store, like this part of my hair knows that we're going to the store. You know, my pinky finger knows that I'm going to the store, even though it doesn't have eyeballs. So every part of the body knows. It has, every part has like the ability to understand, to take in reality from its perspective. The heart's perspective, the heart's perspective is very abstract. It's like, remember the range of complementary pairs of opposites? It's like the other end of the range from the perception, the gross senses of perception that take in details like the exact shade of green right there and the exact shade of pink right there. From that level, the heart understands this. Aren't these lovely? We took this picture at the Pella Tulip Festival. They're the tulips down there. Anyway, such a delicacy in these flowers. There's such a tenderness in these, and these flowers were quite little. They were like that. But the heart understands the flowers from the level of their tenderness. So the heart understands from the level of feeling. And so what this healing is doing is it's clearing out the channels of perception between that really deep feeling level in the heart and the very concise, dense level of the senses of perception. Very acute. That says there's a petal right there. So what we're doing is I'm just feeling through it. I'm feeling through it. And what I'm feeling is just like one layer deeper. If we think of the heart's area of autonomy, or its area of power, you could say, is the feeling level. And the senses of perception, they're looking at that more dense level. It's like right under the dense level, then there's a reality of the flower that sort of mixes the two together. It mixes together the actual structure of the flower with its quality of consciousness, which is so delicate and such a pure intention to express the multifaceted beauty of divinity. Such a beautiful body. Look at this little beautiful body. It's beautiful. So we're looking at that delicate level. Looks like etheric level. The first flop, the first step away from the relative is the etheric level. And so we're right in the etheric level of the senses of perception. And that's where we start to mix. We start to mix together because the etheric level is a map of the physical. It looks just like the physical, only it's just energy. So here we are in our map. So etheric is going to be, if this is the physical here, then this is going to be the etheric right there. So it's still dense enough that it's the shape of the eye or the ear or whatever, the stone, but it's just an energy form of it. This is a very nice level to be activating. So what we're doing is it's like we're kind of like stretching the concept of the senses of perception to reach past physical material perception and start to comfortably, gracefully, naturally embrace the energy, the first layer of energy, the first, like most gross level of the reality of this, of whatever it is that awareness falls upon. What I'm seeing is that as awareness does that, it starts to kind of open up and stretch a little bit. It stretches out and it sees the field of energy in which everything resides. And so it's like all of a sudden there's that feeling of, oh, I'm sitting at the edge of the ocean with all these forms of creation that are just energy forms. And the heart says, yeah, but they each have a very specified feeling associated with them. So there's a feeling. And the feelings have forms. And there's a relationship between the feeling and the form. And this relationship between feeling and form it's a concrete thing. And what's happening is because there's a relationship between the feeling and the form, it's causing some transformation, particularly up in the prefrontal cortex area of the head, to support neural connections that start to put together, start to match together the feeling and the form. And what I'm experiencing is a wave of understanding is flowing from the heart. It's radiating from the heart area, a wave of understanding. The heart knows this. It already knows it. Your body already knows it. We're just working the neural connections so that the awareness or the consciousness will click in with it, will integrate with the experience. So this wave of knowingness is coming from the heart. And when I look at that wave of knowingness, it looks like pure knowingness, pure divine intelligence. So this is a wave of pure being, source of creation energy, flowing through the physical heart area. And as it does that, it's radiating through to the rest of the physiology, particularly the whole brain sensory perception area, to activate. You could say it's like a wave of self-education, that through the heart area, being is coming through in a pure form to awaken understanding, self-understanding. It's consciousness folding in on its own nature in order to create multiple layers of knowingness, of self-understanding. So this is like, it starts to roll like in almost a circular form. Oh, sorry guys, that's the washing machine. Yeah, don't worry about it. It'll do that again, and then it'll stop. Consciousness rolls in on its own nature. It rolls in on its own nature. And with each wave, yeah, right, like the washing machine kind of rolls in like that. Each time it rolls, it washes through the area, and it creates more efficiency in the way this relationship works between the heart's intelligence and the senses of perception, being able to attune themselves to the qualities of pure being, which are inherent in everything upon which the senses of perception fall. Thank you to my team for turning off the washing machine. Anyway. Because the loop becomes more efficient every time, it's able to move faster every time. And as it does that, it washes through the physiology, it washes through the system. Cleansing, it's like a cleansing. Every time it washes through, it creates another layer and another layer and another layer. And softly, the layers get more and more integrated, and they move the whole system, including all the gross senses of perception, move into alignment with the source of creation. And when it gets close enough to the source of creation, what happens is infinity starts to imbibe into the process of consciousness rolling in on its own nature. And when infinity rolls into it, the loops spin infinitely fast. And when that happens, a resolution occurs. Resolution, resolution. And resolution brings integration. It brings transformation. It not only transforms our physiologies down to the very finest level up here in our prefrontal cortices, but it also communicates that wisdom flow, that was that download of pure source energy that was coming from the heart. It communicates it through the whole physiology and down on that axis from big to small, down to the fine, fine, fine levels of the physiology, the molecular level of the physiology where the consciousness of the ancestors resides. And so at that point, it starts to expand. The healing that we're doing now for our physiologies expands out to the collective, to our own collective, our own inner collective, our ancestral collective, as well as through us and through our ancestors to the larger collective. And I love this format of the live webinars, because the live webinars give us this opportunity to do this work at a really big level. It is the integrative effect of all of us doing this healing together that causes the work to ripple out into the creation and promote an awakening effect for the whole collective. And as that happens, there are responses from the collective. There are effects. To be honest, a lot of our collective consciousness, a lot of the collective of humanity isn't really that interested in waking up. I mean, luckily a lot of people are, and we've got a kind of a global awakening that's taking place right now. God bless all of you guys and many, many others. But still, the majority of mankind, the majority of people would prefer to have the easy road in the short run and not worry about the long run. Because we kind of have this opportunity or option whenever we're faced with a challenge, or we're faced with, I want to talk tonight about suffering a little bit, because I'd like to talk about the causal level of the physiology, because that's so important, so vital to the healing process and becoming familiar with that level of the physiology. Thank you. Yeah, by becoming familiar with it, that's how we gain autonomy over the transformation process. So yeah, we're faced with challenges. You know, there is suffering in this world. And what happens is, I was looking at it in a couple of webinars ago, one or two maybe, the concept of Kali Yuga came up, which is a time period we're in that's where suffering is supported by natural law. And that's just a fact, that in this time, the laws of nature that support suffering are a little bit like they're favored. They're favored. So yes, question.
Could you clarify the difference between suffering as negative, destructive behaviors and suffering as not being able to witness this place?
Oh, thank you. So the question is, can I clarify or discriminate the difference between suffering as negative, destructive behaviors and the ability to witness
and be okay, or
yeah,
the inability to witness as being suffering.
Right, the inability to witness the evolutionary value in the destructive process as suffering. Beautiful, thank you, well put. Thank you for that great question. So the destructive laws of nature are favored, or at least they have the ability to kind of take hold in people's lives, and requires a little bit of effort to undo. When an individual in their awareness is able to stabilize their consciousness in a kind of central balanced position between the destructive laws of nature and the creative laws of nature, which makes reference to that axis that I was talking about earlier of the kind of complementary pairs of opposites, that at that point, it's evident that the complementary pairs of opposites are designed to work together to promote an evolutionary effect and to promote transformation, which supports expansion of consciousness. But from an isolated perspective, or if the individual awareness isn't maintaining a point of balance, one can get kind of pulled off and gripped by some negativity somewhere, or one can get pulled off and gripped by some kind of, delightful, inebriating, blissful something or other on the other side. One can get pulled in either direction and gripped by the experience. It's at a more relative level of creation. Yeah. So thank you for the question. However, finding one's way back to balance is generally a process of finding one's way back to wholeness, because the balance point in our awareness is also aligned with the source of creation. So it is a witnessing point of perspective. And when one has the blessing or the gift of being able to step back and witness the experience, then that naturally, spontaneously positions the individual in a place where they're powerful and they can deal with the challenges in the most effective, the most refined, the most efficient manner. So balance, manifesting balance brings us to the topic of today's webinar, which is a deeper dive into the causal body and understanding the nature of the causal field. So the causal body is on this axis that goes from physical material down to unmanifest being, and the causal level is that finest level of feeling. It's that first level of manifestation of consciousness or of being. The first point, because that's where all the seeds are, right? Remember I was saying at the beginning that one of the important premises behind energy healing is not to try to deal with a problem from its superficial level, but to get underneath it, to get bigger than that problem. So the causal level is the level where we are bigger. And so it's important to look at that. And one of the principles of the causal field is that when we bring our awareness to that very deep, very abstract level of consciousness, it is possible to come into that field with the intention to produce various frequencies or vibrations of consciousness which have specific effects, such as the vibration of balance. If a situation is not good and one is feeling overwhelmed, then the intention, if you can have the intention enough to say, oh wow, this situation is not good, I'm feeling overwhelmed. If you're not gripped enough to see that you're overwhelmed, then you're not gripped enough to say, well, how can I find my way back to balance? How can I promote the resonation of balance through this physiology, just like we can promote feelings, you know? You can feel happy, or you can feel sad, or you can feel ambitious, or you can create a sense of resolution. So balance has its own energy frequency and its own energy structure, which is unique and very specified. And we all know what that feels like. Anybody who learned to ride a bike knows what that feels like, right? So there's balance. And it has an energy frequency, it has an energy signature that's specific, and we each experience it in basically the same way. So let's go in. We're just going to go look at balance and like unpack it like it were a little mini suitcase of qualities. So I'm feeling it. And one of the first things I'm feeling about the quality, and I've never done this before, but this is what I love about being with you guys, is that it gives me a chance to see each aspect of creation from multiple perspectives. So thank you all so much for being with me. And on account of that. Balance. When I look at balance, what reads in the physiology first is the bilateral symmetry of the physiology, right? So we all have balance running right down the center of our physiologies. And even though we know everybody's body is like slightly different from the right to the left and so forth, slightly different, the balance point still resides right in the center of our physiologies. And it resides from the crown all the way down through the physiology, all the way through the physiology. Even the space between the feet, even the spaces are points where our consciousness fills those spaces. And that point of balance, which is found in the body between right and left, is also has a gap-like quality. It has a quality to it that's a little bit like not manifest. And I'm just reading it here, just right off the group. But the thing about that is because it isn't right or left. It isn't one quality or another. It's like that place where both can be embraced at the same time. So that's why the quality of balance spontaneously and naturally contains that quality of unmanifest being. Because it's neither one nor the other, and yet it can embrace both. It can hold both. It also has an expansive value, because from that balance, one can bring together the pairs of opposites. So it has this balanced quality of being has an ability to expand. And had this realization this last week with regards to the process of expansion, that the quality of expansion has within it the value of the number 108. Because the nature of 108 is that it represents the way in which consciousness expands. That's why it's an auspicious number. 1 is the one wholeness of creation that goes into 0, like 1, the one universe, goes to 1, 0, goes to 0, which is unmanifest being. And from there, it goes to 8, which is infinity. Infinity. So it's like 1 folds into its own unmanifest nature and then folds back out and back in and back out and back into infinity. So that process is fundamental to the expansion process. So we could say that the number 108 is also contained within the experience of balance. Interesting. And I'm right now just seeing is kind of flashing, getting a download for everybody in the group regarding the significance of numbers and the multiples of 108 and the way in which those numbers, all the multiples of it, because if it folds into its own nature, right, 108 becomes 216 and so forth and so on, how they work together to promote a beautiful, so one of our very brilliant Vedic scholars says here that there are considered to be 108 holy ways of transcending. Oh, is that not the most beautiful thing? And I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are. Thank you for sharing that. So it's beautiful, precious. Anyway, so in the last webinar, which was a webinar for healing, I had just sort of awakened to a lot of new information about the causal realm. So that's why I named this webinar Deeper Explorations in the Causal Realms. So what I'd like to do is just kind of do like a sort of very brief review of some of the points from the last webinar so that we can launch into all the new information from this webinar. And we need to do more healings too. All right. So actually I'm just feeling into the group. I'm feeling that it would be good to do another healing now. It would be good. So what I'm feeling is the quality of balance is stabilizing in the physiology. And stabilizing looks like from the crown of the head down to the tip of the tailbone right now. And this balance, which is stabilizing, is promoting some kind of adjustments in the entire musculoskeletal system of the physiology. Very nice. And there seems to be some kind of a template or blueprint of balanced, bilaterally symmetrical physiology, the balance of the physiology. And so that's coming in as an information download into the body, so the body can accommodate that information by modifying the way the energy in the body flows to nourish the tissues. That means to nourish the bones and the muscles and the fascia, making sure I pronounce that right, connective tissues, all those structures, all the way from the crown of the head to the tip of the tailbone. So this is balance. And it's communicating balance at a very delicate level of the tissues. And it's interesting that there seems to be a kind of a mathematical element to it, because they're part of the, this is what I'm understanding as this is unfolding, part of the principle here is that having the whole musculoskeletal system in balance requires also a certain degree of, we could say, aesthetic proportion, right? Everything needs to be kind of proportionally related to everything else in order for the balance to set in and integrate effectively. I'm still feeling lots of nice energy shifts, particularly in the back, neck, shoulders, the lower back, middle back, all this area, hips, legs, arms. And there are specific intelligences, causal body intelligences, responsible for the structuring of all the different systems of the body, skeletal system, muscular system, etc. So those intelligences are waking up. They're enlivening. And as they do that, our awareness recognizes. We recognize the specific qualities of intelligence in the body responsible for bones, responsible for muscles and connective tissue. And as our awareness falls upon that, it's like the awareness of a parent falling upon the child. The child goes into bliss. The child likes attention. It likes our love. It likes our awareness being with it. And it likes the fact that it's doing something very, very important for the physiology, and that important work is recognized and honored, that it supports even greater flow of awareness through the level of consciousness which is responsible for the restructuring of the physiology. And for a lot of people in this group, I'm specifically seeing down in the lower back area a lot, the lower back, and then down into the legs, knees, hips, that area. And then for other people, there's a lot of awareness in the upper neck, shoulder area, and this very interesting spot I just discovered that's between the skull and the body, right where the head meets the neck. Yeah, it's this kind of significant spot that right there. It seems that particular spot seems to be connected to our ability to integrate individuality with universality. For some reason, the connection between the head, which is where all the awareness of the relative tends to stay up around the head, all the senses of perception that are up here, and all the sensory cortices up in the head. And then when the head area starts to connect in with the rest of the body, oh gosh, I'm feeling a purification for a lot of people in the group regarding this cleaning, a cleansing of past experiences of damage here. There are a number of people in the group who in previous incarnations very likely left the body at a time when there was some kind of severing at that point. Oh, so that it's bringing it all back together again. I can feel all this personal power and personal integrity, integration coming back to everyone's physiology, connecting back. We're just connecting back. We're connecting back individuality with universality. And the body is like the first expression of universality. You know, up here, this is who I am. If I go on Facebook, I show them this part of myself, right? You know, if I'm, nice. Anyway, but because this is where we identify people. We identify individuality with the face and the head. And the first connection between individuality and universality is the connection between the face and head, the part that we show the world, and the physiology. There's pain, trauma, memory patterns, impressions. There are feelings, discordant feelings of betrayal, glyphotic energies, hopelessness. All this is clearing from the connection between the head and the body. You know, so many lifetimes. Most people have, at some point or another, let go of their existence through a disconnect between the head and the rest of the body. So just healing that, layers of it, layers and layers of it. And again, our group is so powerful. I'm so grateful to each one of you that this clearing that's happening for the relationship between the head and the body is going out to the collective. And it's touching many, 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 many souls. Many. I've seen pictures from like Eastern Europe and places like that, where they're just archives of skulls. It's like thousands of skulls, like all those people had the disconnect. And what happens, at a deeper level, the seed sits at a deep level of the causal body, where there's it's that law of nature that supports, it's sort of like it allows suffering to have a grip. on our world. It allows suffering to grip the world. And when suffering is allowed to grip the world, that supports belief systems that are built around a separation between individuality and universality. Spiritual traditions, even spiritual traditions. So this is what's clearing at the collective level right now. For all those folks in Eastern Europe and all the other places, many, many, many places, many. I'm just watching it go out into the collective and release those discordant feelings, memories, impressions, pain, trauma, pain bodies, and threads or cords of consciousness that connect to levels of our universe or levels of our creation, subtle levels of our creation, that somehow benefit from a release like that benefit from misunderstanding or ignorance on the part of the collective. Because we know when there's a lot of ignorance, it's easier to control people, right? Right. So this healing that we're doing is sending a message to these structures at the subtle level of creation that would have the intention to benefit from people's ignorance, that it's done. Resolution is gained. Wholeness is reestablished. These structures that promote evolution come together with the structures that promote suffering and reestablish a new definition of what our reality is at the collective level. Good job. It's huge. I can feel it's like the resolution is like when the resolution comes, it always reminds me of music, because music creates a little tension and then it releases the tension, right? And so the releasing of the tension, rippling out into the field of the collective, is the blessing of tonight's webinar. It's the blessing that we're creating as a collective. Thank you. It comes back to everyone. It comes back to our ancestors. Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. You're beautiful. You're so beautiful. I couldn't possibly do this without you. So we do it. We do it as a collective. All right, let's talk about the causal body. So I'm gonna, now that we've done that healing, I'm going to do a little review of like the latest understandings of what's going on in the causal body, and then we'll move forward from there and probably find some more healings that we can put in from there too. So from the last webinar, I realized that because of the nature of the human nervous system, to experience reality in a sequential unfoldment of moments, we can look at the causal realm, which is very abstract, and it's very beyond the gross senses. So how do we approach it, and how do we understand it, and how do we navigate it? Well, I found 3 ways as of the last webinar, and that was we can look at the causal field as a field, okay, like a big ocean-like structure that's just sitting against the field or right next to the field of the source of creation, unmanifest, quality-less source of creation. So then there's this field of like pure experience and sensation, you could say, feeling right next to it. And that big ocean can divide into smaller segments and subdivide down so that we have all these different realms that we're working with. So when we're working with relationships, we can find the place where one's individual personality or being joins with the other person. I call those sacred gardens of the heart, right? I've been talking about them for years. So the different kinds of realms and sacred, you can think of, I think of the realms like rooms in a house, right? That they're different laws of nature. There's a room for sleeping and a room for cooking and a room for cleaning and a room for watching videos and stuff. There was different rooms. And so the rooms have different purposes. So they're kind of like isolated segments of this big causal realm, all the way down to little spaces that sit around each cell in your body or each molecule in your body or something like that. The energy space around all the form. We can look at the causal realm as a realm, another way of looking. So that's one way. Another way of looking at it is vibrations. That it's this great, you could think of it like the ocean full of waves, and that each wave is its own unique vibratory form. And so that the causal realm has this ability to hum or vibrate with various specific energy signatures or frequencies that produce different effects in the relative, like the quality of balance that we were talking about earlier, or the quality of resolution that we were just talking about, integration, truth, forgiveness, compassion. So many different qualities. And those, when we think of compassion, for example, compassion is an emotion, it's a feeling, and it has a vibratory quality. And when the heart is able to fill with compassion, that feeling in the heart affects all the rest of the physiology, and the magnetic field of the heart is so powerful that it will affect everyone in your environment. In fact, when I say your environment, I don't even just mean your immediate environment, because as a mother, I know that when I am filled with compassion and love, it doesn't matter how far away my children are, they feel that. When I'm happy, they feel that. They know. They know. So it doesn't just travel. It's not, your immediate environment isn't just your space around you. It's everything that you're close to. Seeing some flow of information from our group moving across the veil to the field of all souls that are also not in the physical body right now. Because there's some interesting relationships that go on across the veil, right? You lose somebody you love, then what's going on? And how they feel, and how that affects how you feel. So we're just letting that download come in. Because our heart emanations come through our physical bodies, and our physical bodies are isolated in space-time. So when we produce a feeling of compassion, you or me, that feeling emanates from a specific point in creation. But when a loved one who's not bound by a physical body, yes, this gets into some other stuff. I want to talk about the causal realm. Anyway, when they feel an experience of compassion, that resonation emanates from many points in the web of life at the same time. Because their physiologies aren't isolated in space-time. So they can create a field effect. I mean, we also create a field effect, you and I, but the field effect has a center. It has a kind of a sacred center, which is the temple of the physiology. Whereas when somebody you love who's passed on does that, there isn't really the same type of sacred center associated with it. It's very interesting. So remember I was saying earlier, when I'm doing healing, I like to put my attention, and then what I experience is reflected off of this physiology. When we're having an interaction with someone who's passed out of their physiology, so they're not bound by space-time, what happens is our love, like I use my father, because he's not alive anymore. So my love radiates to him from a specific point in space-time. And it reflects off of his physiology, which is not isolated in space-time. And his love comes back to me from all these points in creation. And then what I experience, this physiology, which is bound in space-time, is the mirror, right? It's the mirror of his experience. So what does it do? This physiology then experiences that love in every little point of the whole physiology. Whereas before, the emanation was coming from the heart area, right? But now the physiology is experiencing it in its totality, not just every point within the physical form, but every point within the range of the self, from very dense to the very expanded and abstract causal level of the physiology. So what that does is it's like a it's like a teaching tool. It's like a teaching tool that then I experience the emanation of compassion from the bigger form of myself, the big energy form of self. And then the question is, whose compassion is that? It started out here, right? Isolated in the physiology. And then it went out there, and then it reflected back from out there, and then it reflected back from the bigness of self. And then the question is there really a separation between my compassion and my Father's compassion? And the answer is no. The sacred garden of the heart, where he and I still have a connection, is just filled with compassion. And it fills with compassion from several perspectives at once. It becomes very powerful and multi-leveled, multifaceted. And what this does, with this realization that's been downloaded, that's been coming through right now about the mechanics of how this happens, is opens the doorway for coordinated efforts between us and our support system. You could think of people who love you as your support system. So between us as individuals and our support system, even across the veil, which has a greater capacity to work at a collective level. Beautiful. You're beautiful. You're beautiful. You're beautiful. There's no way I could have found that on my own. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Beautiful. All right. So we're still reviewing. We're still reviewing from last time of the causal body. Okay, we can look at the causal realm as realms or spaces at the finest level of creation. We can look at the causal realm as vibrations or frequencies. The third way we can look at the causal realm is humming spaces. Like the spaces, they're not dead, right? They're not asleep. Well, okay, that needs to be qualified. But anyway, but the spaces basically are spaces which are humming in their own nature. They're humming and vibrating. And I was an instrumental music instructor years ago, and one of the simple premises of instrumental music is the shape of the instrument determines very much the timbre and range of that instrument. So if you have a big kettle drum, pong, pong, pong. And if you've got a piccolo, I can't even do it, but like really high little sounds. So the little instrument makes high sounds, and the big instruments make big low sounds. And so the shapes of the realms of the causal field determine the sort of vibration that they produce. And it is the vibrations that form the building blocks for the whole manifesting process, for the way in which the body builds itself from the ground up. And that's really important for healing, because when a person is dealing with ongoing health issues, it means that somewhere in the causal level of their physiology, they've got kind of locked in some space that's creating a vibration which is not harmonious with their evolution. It is not harmonious with their highest and best interest. So the secret is to get the awareness. Oh, I guess I should finish up that point about that third. When we look at the spaces as humming or vibrating spaces, what we're really looking at are energy bodies, really. Really, I mean, what is an energy body? It's like energy contained within a certain space, which has life force in it. Energy bodies. So for some energy healers, a certain amount of discussion goes into the process of dealing with your, working with your guides, or working with master healing angels, or working with the ascended masters, or the gods, or this, that, and the other. So that's one way of looking at the causal realm. What I found in all the years of healing is that it's very useful to be able to look from any of those three angles, because there are certain times when looking from the perspective of beings is useful. And there are other times where it's not. Particularly if we're dealing with something that's very dark and malevolent, it's actually easier to look at that malevolent structure as simply a structure or simply a vibration. Because then it's easier to witness it, right? Because if we think, oh, it's some big thing, it's some living force, and it's got some perspective on creation bigger than my perspective, and I feel overwhelmed, and etc., then it's too hard. So there are reasons and purposes for having these three different ways we can shift back and forth from looking at it as a being, looking at it as a space or realm, and looking at it as a vibration or frequency. Good? Yes, question.
Is that a mental construct, or is that moving up and down the perspective axis at all?
Oh God, that's such a good question. He's asking, thank you for asking that. The question is that simply a mental construct, or is that moving up and down the axis of awareness? Ooh, sorry. God, that's such a good question. Okay, so I would say we could look at it as both, depending on our perspective. So yes, it's a mental construct in that one consciously chooses. There are times, like I find myself doing this in healing sessions, is I'll consciously choose to reference some subtle structure which is making a person sick, reference it as a realm, or reference it as a vibration, or reference it as a being. So from that level, it's a conscious perspective, but from that level, I'm going with the essential experience. And the experience is just one. Whether I describe it as this or this or this, it's just one experience. And what I'm doing is I'm using speech to define it so that it can be worked with, so we can work with it to get the specific effect desired. So when it goes through the whole speech pattern and speech cycle, it goes up into a kind of intellectual construct. However, the actual experience of it, the actual experience is a kind of multifaceted experience. And your question is so interesting because it ties into something that came out in the last couple of weeks since the last webinar. And that was that I realized that other kinds of bodies that experience reality in different ways than human bodies experience also see the causal realm differently. They don't see that from those three perspectives that we see it from. They see it from other perspectives. At the time, I was actually looking into star energy, and I was working with some different energies that were coming from the stars. And I was like, well, how does a star look at the causal realm of creation? And the star sees the causal realm of creation as this field of light, which is expanding and contracting, all the time, expanding and contracting. So it's not really looking at it in terms of entities or realms. It's just, there's a kind of, it seems that stars look at the causal field from this one perspective that really works for them. And it's a kind of a pure energy way of interpreting what's happening there. And it's very beautiful, and it ties in beautifully with all those members of our collective tonight. Oh, I see some questions have come in too, who are experiencing from the level of Brahman consciousness, which is also that perspective of the whole field of creation is just this interplay of the laws, the constructive and destructive laws of nature that are interacting dynamically with each other that build up the entire manifest level of creation. Beautiful. Let's see what the questions have, because we're already, gosh, I can't believe it. I'm looking at the clock and I haven't even really gotten into the meat of all the new information about the causal realm yet. So here's a question. A few minutes ago, oh good, a few minutes ago you said something and a big wave of fear arose. Ooh, thank you so much for this webinar. It's been really helpful. So yeah, when the big wave of fear arises, you're seeing it because it's leaving. A lot of times there are energies that are like stuck deep within the subtle tissues of the being. And when we get in there with our awareness and start, oh, I know what I was talking about. I bet you I know what I was talking about there. I was talking about looking at the causal field in terms of entities. And sometimes the entities are like, they seem really subtle and abstract, and they seem like they have more control over the fundamentals of manifestation than we do, because our awareness tends to be more at the superficial level. However, they don't. That's the first thing to know. First rule of entities is you are always bigger. You are always bigger. You are always bigger. Because we as humans range from complete unmanifest to completely physical manifest. And anything that isn't completely physical manifest is less. So it doesn't matter if some other life forms stay closer to the mechanics of manifestation level of creation. It doesn't mean that they have some kind of special autonomy or knowledge that we don't have, because they don't. Not to be bullied and pushed around. We weren't made for that. Any experience at a subtle level of creation that is uncomfortable, any experience like that has a counterpart. These are the complementary pairs of opposites. So if you happen to bump into something, and we've all done it, how many people have gone visiting somewhere and gone into some place, location, that has a kind of dicey sort of feeling, kind of creepy sort of feeling in it. Maybe it's a place where people were very unhappy. Maybe you happened by chance to go into, or even going in somewhere like a hospital where people are suffering a lot. You know, they're places where there's a lot of suffering. And we need to talk a little bit more about suffering in order to understand the causal realm. But if you've ever had an experience like that, that's like at the feeling, the physiology is picking up, there's something there that's not quite savory. It's a little unsavory something there. Then what happens is you experience that unsavory feeling and know that when we position ourselves at the point of balance, that supports the emergence of the complementary opposite to that unsavory feeling. And all you have to do is hold the balance in order for the complement to come and undo that malevolent feeling. It acts like an interference pattern to the vibration that was uncomfortable. And you'll notice, anybody who's been in a hospital will notice that even though there is a lot of suffering in hospitals and people go there because they're suffering, there's also a tremendous liveliness of angelic energies. Anybody notice that? It happens all the time. I think we've got our beautiful hands raised. We've got our near-death experience people in on this webinar. And they know that it happens. That when people are at these critical points of transition, which is what happens in hospital. Oh, more people hands raised. Yeah, that in the hospital, when people are at these points of critical transition, angelic energies are required to support the transition so that it is an evolutionary experience for the individual. And that regardless of outcome, regardless of whether the outcome is that they die, or the outcome is that they come through some big trauma and they are so much more connected to their dharma and their spiritual roots and their life purpose. That happens. All right. Okay, so I started a few minutes late. We're really already, can't believe, already at our hour and 15 minutes. So tomorrow we'll go into the details, even further details, because since the last webinar, after the last webinar, I was like, oh gee, I shared all this new information that I had about the causal realm. You know, what am I going to tell people next time? Because the next webinar is about the causal realm. But sure enough, I was very blessed over the last couple of weeks to get a lot more deep insights, experiences, and understandings about that, which I really want to share with everyone. So there isn't really time now, but we'll do it next time. Also, quite a few questions came in. A lot of them came in from Europe. So I'll be answering questions from the Europeans, our dear, precious, beloved Europeans, very great souls in Europe. We'll answer those tomorrow as well. All right, everybody. So thank you for being with me tonight. It's been really exciting. This was really fun for me. I don't always, a lot of times I make like little outlines for these talks, or I have at least some, I have at least some idea of what I'm going to talk about. And tonight, I was just setting up lights right to the last minute. So that didn't happen. But I feel as if we covered a lot of good territory and really stabilized a lot of the information from last time. Got some good healings in. So we'll do more tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll really take off now because we set the foundation tonight. So tomorrow we'll really take off and move into the new area. Thank you very much, everybody, for being with me. Have a good night. Bye.